I understood that the theme today is Gevura. If we look at the Shulchan Aruch, the very first halacha, in fact, the very first word in the Shulchan Aruch opens with Yitgaber, Ka'ari la'amod baboker la'avodat baro. The first thing a person has to do is wake up in the morning, and that requires Gevura, Yitgaber, it's the first word. And that was something that was very hard for our son Maoz. I mean, getting up in the morning was hard. It required tremendous gvura to do that. And this is his usual state. Is it possible to turn off the light here and people can see better? Oh.
No, you could.
Whatever. Hopefully, none of you will be in this state at the end of the talk, I'm hoping. So getting up in the morning, I don't know if any of you as parents or on yourselves have dealt with this issue, but his entire life, getting him up in the morning was always a challenge for us. Going back about 10 months to February 15th, Vav Adar Aleph, at that point, Maoz had been fighting for 95 days inside of Asa. And the way it works in Asa is that, many of you may know this, but in case some of you do not, is that the soldiers would capture a certain area, and then at night, they would sleep in a house in the area that they're in. And then the next day, they'd move on and they'd go into another house. And they would usually stay in that house 1 night, 2 nights, maybe 3 nights, and then they would move on. So this is hanging out in the houses. It's very good accommodations there. You saw the pictures. In those houses, it's not every minute that they're fighting. There's also some downtime. Here we have a little video of Maoz telling a little story in Asa. Okay.
I don't think we need to turn off all
אחרי שהוא נפצע, פינו אותו. קיצר, לפני שפינו אותו, שאלנו אותו, יש לך משהו שאתה צריך צפתים? לא, כל מה שאני צריך הוא מוריד כבר. לקחנו אותו לאכזרית, העמסנו אותו לאכזרית. אחרי שהעמסנו אותו, התיק לא שלו, התיק לא שלו, אני עליתי למעלה, לקחתי את התיק לא הפוך. זה מסובך וזה, לקחתי את התיק לא הפוך, העמסנו אותו לאכזרית. אני יורד מהאכזרית, תקל מה נפל, לא, וואו, ומתי שבת מחר? אני חילוני ואני עכשיו נהייתי מאמין. אני גם מאמין. זה לא מאמין.
So when they're in these houses, they have some downtime too. 10 months ago, approximately on February 15th, 12 soldiers were sitting in the living room of the house, and it was 9 o'clock in the morning, and they were preparing to go out to do what they needed to do that day, and a grenade was thrown into the room, and it exploded, and all 12 soldiers were injured. Maoz was not in that room. Maoz was sleeping in the next room, and when the grenade blew up, he immediately jumped up, woke up, and ran into the room. So first of all, when I heard this, I said, okay, now we know what it takes to get him up in the morning. He ran into the room, and the medics started to work on the injured. Maoz was not a medic, but 12 injured soldiers is what they call in Hebrew, Rav Nifkaim. There's multiple wounded. Two medics is not enough. So he started assisting the medics with the first aid. Even though he wasn't a medic, they had certain minimal knowledge. His immediate officer was injured very, very seriously, and Maoz saved his life by being able to stop the bleeding from a major artery in a way that usually soldiers don't know how, but they had taught them this procedure called packing, and he was successfully stopped the bleeding, which saved his life. And then he went from soldier to soldier, trying to help them. There was another unit with them, the canine unit, the dog handlers, and their commander was injured, And he was very, very nervous because he felt a warm liquid all up and down his back. So Maoz ripped off his shirt, and he looked him up and down. He says, it's okay, you don't have to be worried. You got shrapnel to the shluker. You know, the shluker is those water things that they have in their back with the straw that comes around. So his shluker was punctured, and it was just water. And he was injured lightly in his legs. Then they had to evacuate the soldiers. And they're on the second floor, and there's a stairwell out on the outside of the building, and they had to, each soldier, bring him down and take him in. The way it works there is they have these armored personnel carriers called achzarit, and some of them are set up with very serious medical equipment and doctors. And so they come, and they're the ones that deal with them once they bring them down from the house, and they put them in the achzarit. The doctors deal with them, and then the achzarit takes them to the helicopter, which brings them to a hospital in Israel. So 12 times they went up and down, up and down, up and down, getting the wounded out of the area. The thing that I have to realize is that the grenade that was thrown into the house was not a one-shot, found an opportunity to throw a grenade into the house. This was the opening shot of a planned attack on their house. So the entire time that Maoz and the medics are dealing with the wounded, and the entire time that they're going up and down, getting the wounded away, that entire time, there's a battle going on. And the other soldiers, the ones that are not wounded, are defending the house. So all of this is going on under fire. It's not like they can calmly take them downstairs. It's all going on under fire. We have a little video of that, part of that. We're going to see Maoz, when they bring down the wounded soldier, he's standing in the very back, sort of directing us. That's Maoz in the back. Okay, you can hear in the background all the shooting, which, by the way, in the other one, when he's telling a story and they're commonly hanging out in the house, you might have also heard all the shooting going on in the background. That's just the way it is all the time there. So after they evacuated the wounded, and the battle was still going on, Maoz ran upstairs to his weapon, which is the Mag. The Mag is this very big gun you see here, and over here. The Mag, the main thing you have to know about the Mag is that A, it's very heavy and no one wants to be the guy that has to schlep it around. And B, it's also heavy, it gives heavy cover fire. So he ran upstairs to his Mag and he went with it up to the roof to give cover fire to the soldiers that are battling the terrorists on the street level. And when he arrives on the roof, I was told this, he finds two people there. The mifaked, the head commander of the whole unit, he was in a unit called Sayeret Tzanchanim, so this was the commander of the entire Sayeret Tzanchanim, was already on the roof commanding, giving orders about the battle. And there was another soldier there, and the other soldier was standing on the roof shooting from his regular personal gun. And so he told me, this soldier, that I'm shooting with my gun, and all of a sudden Maoz appears on the roof with his Mag. You have to understand his commander was injured. He's not getting orders. He just did what he knew he had to do. So he comes up, and all of a sudden Maoz appears there with a smile on his face in the middle of the battle. Maoz was always smiling. And he says to me, Yair, step aside with your toy gun there. Let me get in there with some actual firepower, because the regular gun, as far as Maoz was concerned, was a toy gun compared to the Mag in terms of the firepower. So he steps back, and Maoz comes in with his gun, and he starts to give heavy cover fire, which forces the terrorists on the street to retreat into the building next to them. And Maoz kept shooting at them and trapped them in the building for a very long time. A very long time with the Mag is about 10, 15 minutes. During that time, they brought a grenade. They brought, a tank. And the tank shot at the house, toppling it on the terrorists. However, it's all very crowded there. So it's like imagine like in the old city kind of situation. So they're on top of Maoz was shooting from the roof of their house, and the terrorists were in a house very close by, maybe between like here and the stairs, maybe even closer. So when the tank shot at the house and the house crumbled, pieces of that building flew, and one of the pieces flew right at Maoz and into his head. And he did not die from that immediately. He was 38 minutes later, he was in the hospital, which is very fast. 38 minutes later, he was in the hospital in Soroka. Varda and I, we live on a yeshuv called Talmon, and we were home, and we get a call at about 12:30 that Maoz has been injured seriously, and in 10 minutes, they're going to come to our house to take us to him. So 10 minutes, they come to our house, we get in the car, and they start driving to Beersheba, to the Soroka hospital, which is an hour and a half away from our house. And we have no idea what his situation is. They call it patsua kashe, seriously injured. But when you say patsua kashe, there's a huge range. Patsua kashe can go to patsua kal, lightly injured, or it can go the other way as well. So we really had no idea. We didn't know where the injury was, what the situation, we knew nothing. Excuse me. When we get to Beersheba, they whisk us right in to see him, and they take us into, he was already in the intensive care, and we see him there, and he's in bed, unconscious, hooked up to all the intensive care things, and his head is all bandaged up. So we basically still have no idea what the situation is. And then the doctor takes us into his office, and he says, I'm very sorry to tell you that he suffered head damage, severe, irreversible damage to his brain. And also the piece of building that's lodged in his head is inoperable. So there's no hope. There's nothing to do. So I said to him, what are we talking about here? He says, maybe a few hours or maybe a day or two, a few days. So we walk out of there, obviously very broken, and we meet an army person called the Ksinat Nifkaim, that she's in charge of liaising between the families and the army. And she tells us, look, it might not seem that way right now, but you've actually been given a gift, because very often soldiers die in battle. The parents receive they come to their house and they tell them, they receive the news that their child has fallen, and the next day there's a funeral, and that's it. But Maoz is still alive, even though he's not conscious, and he doesn't have a lot of time, but he's still alive. So you have time to lipared, to depart from him, to say goodbye to him. So that was very good advice. And we have 6 children. We have 5 boys and a girl. Maoz is our 4th. So we have married children and grandchildren. So we had all of our children come to the hospital, and we started a process of saying goodbye to Maoz. And not just us. His friends started coming to the hospital, his teachers, his rabbis, everyone who was a part of Maoz's life and loved Maoz started streaming to the hospital and started saying goodbye to him. We explained to them that, this is an opportunity to say goodbye to Maoz. And this was on Thursday that this all happened. So this is Thursday, Friday. We went through a very difficult Shabbat there. Shabbat, he was still stable. The doctor says he's stable. The doctor says to us, I didn't think that we'd still be here now. He was surprised too. But then he explained to us the medical reason why he was still stable. Sunday passes, he's still stable. Monday was a day that we knew that Maoz was actually supposed to come home. From October 7th till the day Maoz was injured on February 15th, he had been home one time for 72 hours. But we knew before all this that on Monday, after 8 weeks straight in Gaza, they're going to get out for a few days. And Varda already told them at work that she's not coming. So on Monday morning, when they got out, they didn't go home, the boys. The boys came together to the hospital to see Maoz. And they got to the hospital around late afternoon, maybe 3:34, and they had an opportunity to depart from him. They didn't know his situation was as dire as it was, and they had a very emotional time there. And then we decided after they left that we want to do something that we hadn't done yet. We decided to have a special, a family tefillah, just the immediate family in the room with Maoz. So we got everyone together, and about 7 o'clock in the evening, we went to his room, just the family. And we said some Tehillim, we did a little singing, and very, very quickly, like maybe less than 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, after we're sitting there, we suddenly see all the numbers on the intensive care monitor, all the numbers start to plummet in front of us. And so immediately I said, okay, this is it. And we said, the whole family together, we said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And as we finished that, everything got to zero. And that was that. And we felt, I mean, I don't know the medical side of it really, but we felt that Maoz said goodbye to everyone he needed to say goodbye to, except for his army people who were still fighting in Gaza after that. So once they came and he had an opportunity to say goodbye to them and they had an opportunity to say goodbye to him, he was able to go. That's how we viewed it. When we left the room, of course, there were other soldiers also in intensive care. And the difference between Maoz and the other soldiers is that we were told from the first minute that there's no hope and there's no medical procedure. And there were no medical procedures done on him. We weren't, usually in people in intensive care, you have all these medical decisions to make and you're constantly updating and what's the situation. Here, we didn't have any of that. It was just waiting. But there was another family whose parents were there and we spoke with them and their son had been there already a number of weeks, like a month even. And in intensive care, sometimes they want the patient to be under, but sometimes they want to revive him. And this soldier was injured very seriously in many, many places. An issue with his eyes, I think they sewed his arm back on, his legs. He was very, very seriously wounded, and they, for a week, were trying to wake him up. And at all hours of the day, you saw his mother and his girlfriend were doing these exercises that were supposed to try to help him wake up. And he wasn't waking up, and everyone was very worried, of course. When we walked out of the room after Maoz had passed, we passed his room and we looked inside and we saw that he had woken up. At the same moments that Maoz had passed, he sort of came back. And we have since, Varda has spoken with his mother several times since then. He's doing very well. He's already walking and talking and getting stronger every day. This battle that I told you about was not the only battle. That was his final battle in Gaza. But he had other battles, very serious ones as well, this is Maoz being evacuated on the helicopter. About a month before that, on a Friday morning, Maoz was out on patrol, and they worked together with the tanks. There's tanks that work together with them. And the tank that was with them was hit by an anti-tank missile, and one of the soldiers in that tank was killed, Uriel Silverman from Nechalim. And another soldier was injured very, very seriously, very seriously. He was in a coma for 4 months. He has since woken up from that. But Maoz was very involved in giving the cover fire with his mag, in order to allow the medical people to get in there for the wounded. We're going to watch a little video of that, a short video. Maoz, you're going to see Maoz on the left side of the screen at the bottom of the building kneeling, shooting with his mag. You'll see him a little. And you'll see the tank in the background. There's Maoz right there. That's Maoz. So that was on a Friday morning. Later that day, in the late afternoon, Maoz and his commander and his officer went into a house to check it out to see if that would be a good place for them to stay that night. Maoz was in charge of preparing the house. There's certain things they had to do to the house to prepare it to stay there, and he was in charge of that. So he went in with him to check it out, and his officer and him were standing by a window, and all of a sudden Maoz sees in the window opposite them a terrorist lifting a gun and pointing at him. So Maoz took his officer and he pulled him back, and the bullets went like that, and then they both dropped onto their stomach, and the bullets were shooting over their head, and Maoz and his officer crawled down their stomach outside, almost like a movie. They crawled out of the room on their stomachs, And Maoz went to the other room, and he stood up in front of the window, and then he shot at another soldier came and shot from the other side, and they were able to kill all of the terrorists, 5 of them, without anybody being injured. And he saved that officer's life. That was the first time he saved his life. The second time he saved his life was when he stopped his wound. It's the same officer. And over this time in Gaza, there were other battles as well. And Maoz managed to exhibit tremendous gvura in the classical sense of the word. And Varda and I pondered, we talked about during Shiva, where does he get that quality from? I didn't think it was from me. So where did he get that quality from? And Varda will share some thoughts about that.
Sit by the computer. So as Eitan said, during the Shiva, suddenly this idea came to me. And I thought about my great-grandparents and my great-grandmother, Mordechai and Rachel Linzer. Lederman. And they were living in Belgium during World War II when the war broke out. And they had 2 little daughters, my mother and her sister, my aunt. And soon after the war broke out, my grandfather was taken to a labor camp. And my grandmother was left alone with her 2 little daughters. Here you see a picture of her pushing my mother in her stroller with the yellow star on her jacket. And what's so incredible about my grandmother is that, as opposed to most of the people living at that time, she was able to have foresight and understand that the lives of her daughters and the lives of the Jewish people were at great risk. And she contacted the underground, and they were only able to find a place for my mother and her sister, for my aunt. And my grandmother made this decision where she separated herself from her daughters and put them in hiding by a family, a Christian family, knowing that she would probably never see them again. And these are pictures of my mother and my aunt living with this family. They took very good care of them. They were able to hide them in the open and say that they were their nieces from another, from the city coming to the country to get away from the shooting, the war. And what ended up happening was both my grandmother and my grandfather were both taken to Auschwitz eventually, and they were both killed. I'm named after my grandmother, Rachel, Varda. And when I was thinking about their story, I was thinking about how my grandmother had great gvura, bravery, knowing that to separate herself from her children. I mean, this is a story I grew up with, but it only hit me what an amazing thing that was once I became a mother. And to know that you're probably never going to be reunited with your children, but their lives and continuing OUisrael and for your children to be able to live is more important. And I feel that bravery maybe was passed on to Maoz. And my grandparents were killed al Kiddush Hashem, but Maoz was killed, not only was he killed al Kiddush Hashem, but he was killed fighting for OUisrael and making it possible for all of us to be here. So that's even a greater level. But Maoz, to us, until he was killed, was a regular kid. Happy, smiley, loved sports. Here's him he was involved in Kung Fu. They would have these competitions every year, like floor wrestling. And he, after being the 4th boy, was always the winner. He would always beat everybody. And that's him on getting 1st place at one of the competitions. And he loved going on trips and going in the water and going on Tulim and Mayanot. And he learned how to rappel, and he bought all the equipment for rappelling, and he loved to do that. He loved his nieces and nephews and always wanted to hold them, loved holding the babies. So he was just a happy, smiley, friendly, great kid. And this is him on his first day of school, Kita Aleph, and he looks so happy, but he doesn't know what's awaiting him because school is actually a very, very big challenge for Maoz. And here's him getting his siddur in Kita Aleph, and he had difficulty, some learning difficulties, difficulty learning how to read, difficulty attention issues, and school was always a challenge, but he was a good kid, didn't usually have any behavioral issues, not like his older brothers. And he worked hard. And when he was in 7th grade, at where we live, most of the boys, almost all the boys, go away for high school in 9th grade and to dormitory high schools all over Israel. I'm sure you maybe heard about that. And he knew that he wanted to get into a specific high school where his counselors from B'nai Akiva were. And it wasn't such an academic place, but it's very, very hard to get into. And they look at your report cards, and they only take 60 kids out of 600. So he knew that it wasn't going to be easy to get in. And so he started working really hard and studying, asking Eitan to help him study for tests, and me and a good friend who always does well at school. And in the end, after being waitlisted, he did get in to this place that he wanted to go to, and he loved it. And he made the most incredible friendships there. This is him. This is us on the first day, and that's him there. But again, it wasn't easy for him. And in this school, they have something which they call a Gemara marathon, which is a week in the winter when things are slow, where they don't learn any secular studies and they just learn Gemara. And they have all kinds of competitions, like personal and from one class to the other and one grade to the other. And Maoz was very motivated to do well there, even though learning Gemara was very hard for him. So he forced his friend, who was a much stronger Gemara learner, to practice with him, going over the Gemara again and again and learning it by heart and learning how to say it. And he was walking, it was in Dimona, his high school. They were walking around the streets there, repeating it over again, doing the Aramaic again and again and repeating it. And he put so much effort in that at the end, he actually got the award for the best student because of that effort that he put in. And they were able to recognize that. Here we have a short video of him in the Beis Medrash, standing in front of his Rebbe, telling over by heart the sugya that he learned in the Gemara, right? Telling it over and saying it and repeating it. And it happened to be... That's him in 9th grade. And we just love this video, which we only got during our Shiva. A parent who had gone that one evening to visit had taken a video of the Beis Medrash, and it happened to be that Maoz was that moment standing up, talking, giving it over to his Rebbe. So he went through yeshiva, high school, and he did okay there. It wasn't always so easy, but he put in the effort. And it came time for him to decide what to do after high school. And he decided he wanted to go to a Hesder yeshiva. And there was, again, a specific one that he wanted to go to. And that's actually much easier to get into, these yeshivas. But the Rebbe came to interview him and do like a little Gemara test for him. And he said to him, he said, Maoz, your Gemara learning is weak. Like, you have a hard time with Gemara learning. And in our yeshiva, we learn Gemara from the morning to the night, all day. And maybe you'd be better off in a different place where they learn other things and it's not as intense. But Maoz said, no, this is the place I want to go. And it's the type of guys that I want to be with. And I'm going to make it work. So he knew that he had this challenge ahead of him. And what did he do? He asked the Rebbe, will you have a chavrusa with me? And his close friend, who also is much stronger in learning Gemara, to have a chavrusa with him, and an older guy who came back from the army already, that Maoz had heard that he's a strong learner. And each of them described during the funeral and at the Shiva and everyone who would sit around in the base medrash described what it was, what the chavrusa was like. Maoz learning in the base medrash. So his chavrusa would read to him the line in Gemara and explain it. And then Maoz would say, Lo hevanti, I didn't understand. And he would explain it again. Lo hevanti, again. Lo hevanti, again. Finally he understood. Okay, great. Next line, again. Lo hevanti, again and again and again. And when we heard about this, we felt that he wasn't only a gibor, and he didn't only fight in the army and in Gaza, but also in his day-to-day life. When something was important to him, he wasn't embarrassed. He didn't say, oh, okay, like usually I'm a teacher. Usually when you explain something twice to a student, they're like, oh, okay, fine, I understand, because they're embarrassed. They don't want to seem stupid. And he didn't do that. He didn't have any pride. He just knew that if he was going to succeed in yeshiva, and it was all for himself, if he was going to succeed, he had to understand it. And so he didn't give up. And he kept fighting to understand it. His Rebbe said that he thinks that Maoz had a harder time in yeshiva than getting into this elite unit in the paratroopers because he fought so hard for it. And eventually, after being in yeshiva for a little bit over a year, he realized that he wasn't able, he kept doing lots of cheshbon nefesh. He kept, going and saying, like, am I putting in my all? And when he felt that he wasn't able to put in his all anymore, he decided that it was time to enlist in the army. And this is him on his first day in the army, and he went into this elite unit in the paratroopers. And that unit doesn't have a lot of religious soldiers in it. I think he was about one of 3 in his group of 30. And Maoz is not the type to, show off about things, but he had things that were important to him, and he continued to do them in the army. And people noticed. And his friends told us that they would be on these very long hikes. They would be walking with all of their equipment on them. And then they'd get a chance to sit down and rest. And everyone would sit down and try to get every second of rest in. And Maoz would be exhausted as well. As we said, he had the heaviest weapon. And he'd sit down and he would take out of his pocket a little book, which usually was, they told us, his friends, Mesilat Yesharim, and which is a book that, at least on one level, is pretty easy to read. And it's just teaching you how to be a better person in your relationship to God and your relationship with other people. And that's what he would do when he had a chance. He would sit and take it out. And all the boys around him were so impressed with that. I mean, they really didn't have, many of them didn't have any contact with religious Jews. And then they see this boy just quietly taking it out and learning it. One of the boys with him had a chavrusa with him in Mesilat Yesharim. They started learning it. And so Mesilat Yesharim has become kind of like this thing that, for Maoz, right after he was killed, so one of our friends made a WhatsApp group with a daily, with learning, going through it with recordings, and kind of represented him. And we have here a picture of him in Gaza, in a house in Gaza. And he's lying there in all of his equipment, boots on, ready. And you see he's holding a little book. And we think he's awake because if he was sleeping, the book probably would fall. But what's that book? It's a special series of Gemaras that were put out for soldiers for this war, which is kind of like the shot and scene where one side is the Gemara and the other side is easy explanation. And that's what he's doing when there's a couple minutes to relax in the house in Gaza. We got this WhatsApp, on Yom HaZikaron, actually. Someone sent it to our army liaison, and it got to us. Someone who saw Maoz on the base when he was in training. I'll just read it to you because it's very, very special, I think. I wanted to share a memory about Maoz from when he was in his advanced commando training. I remember that many times it was difficult to find a minyan for Mariv, but Maoz was always there, with eyes red from fatigue. He would always come to the shul to daven and learn when he had a few spare moments. This was time that could have been spent in his bed, and he had every excuse to allow himself to sleep. Many times I would find him late at night in the shul, fighting to stay awake and trying to learn just a little bit more, battling to keep a close connection with learning Torah and the values that are truly important. And what we feel is so impressive with this is that it didn't come easy for him, and he really, really had to fight with everything. But he also he tried to find things that he could learn that were things that he could keep up, and he could do, that he could handle. When he was in 12th grade, he came over to Eitan one day, and he says to him, "Abba, this Shabbos I'm finishing Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, all of the books of the Mishnah." And Eitan says to him, "I know you always have like a pocket Mishnah in your, in your pocket, but I didn't know that you finished all of Mishnah." And he said, "Yeah, well, when I was in 9th grade, our Rosh Yeshiva told us that if you learn 3 Mishnayot a day and 4 on Shabbos, then in 12th grade you'll finish all of Mishnah." So that's what I did. So again, he took things upon himself that were doable, and that way to be consistent in what he did. So Maoz was in the army, and he had finished his training, and he was a regular, soldier and doing different things, and happened to be home on Simchas Torah. He was out of the army for the Yontif, for Shabbos. He had gone with friends to another place for Simchas Torah, and comes October 7th, and we wake up in the morning. I didn't wake up. Eitan wakes up early in the morning. He goes to shul. In our shul, we didn't have any sirens, but at about 7:30 in the morning, somebody comes in, bangs on the bima that Israel is at war. Everybody should go home. Everybody should turn on their phones. Most of the people in our community have guns. Take your guns. They didn't know how it's going to affect us. People who might be called up for miluim should, to make sure to turn on their phones, maybe check what's going on. So Eitan comes home and wakes me up and tells me what's going on. And a little while after that, Maoz called me. He was on some farm where not a lot of people were around, but somehow he had heard some rumors. And he calls me, and I picked up the phone on Simchas Torah, on Yontif, on Shabbos. So as soon as I picked up the phone, I don't even think we had a conversation. I don't think I even spoke. He just said, "Okay, I'm coming home." Because he understood if I picked up the phone, then whatever rumors he had heard were true. And Maoz comes home, gets home about an hour later. Eitan missed him. Eitan was in shul still when Maoz came home. He packed up all of his equipment, and I made him some sandwiches, and he was out of the house in 7 minutes. He was in and out in 7 minutes. At the time, we only had one car, and I told him, "Just take it, and we'll figure it out." And he drove to his base, which is near Netanya, about an hour away from our house. And everyone in his group also just showed up, got there, even before being called. And they were helicoptered down to the south, near Gaza. They were there by 1:30 in the afternoon. And they were helping, protect the yeshuvim and kibbutzim. Maoz was our soldier. He was the one who was in active duty, and so obviously something crazy is going on. We didn't understand exactly what was going on, but of course he's going to be called up. But we have other sons who had been in the army, and when each son had gone to the army, we worried about him and had sleepless nights. There were times where things were tense, and and then they finish and they're home, and the next one goes. You worry about him. But we're sitting in our house with our son Shachar, who's 25 years old, and he gets a call. "There's a war. Come up north. we have to defend our country. And so Shachar packs up his equipment and he leaves. And then, not with our car, because that's already gone, but there was already like our tramping, like ride group of the Yeshuv, like on WhatsApp, was so active that day on Simchas Torah, because everyone was helping each other get up to where they were being called up. And our son Eliezer, lives in our Yeshuv, married with 2 kids. At the time, his wife was expecting their third. And he comes over like an hour before Shabbos is over. I was called up, and he comes to get his equipment that he left in our house. So by the time we make Havdalah on Motzei Simchas Torah, we have 3 kids in the line of fire, as far as we know. And that was just something that I had never imagined. Like, each time I sent off a kid to fight, but I didn't think about, first of all, I don't know how much I thought about them going to war, but not that all of them at the same time would be fighting. So it was very tense times during that time. And as Eitan mentioned, Maoz went into Gaza with his company, and they were there for 7 weeks straight, and then he came home for 3 days. And during those 7 weeks, they were not allowed, they didn't bring their cell phones into Gaza, and we did not speak to him at all. He actually wrote letters that then they sent out with the people who were bringing in equipment and food, and then like we would get a picture of the letter, and we were also able to send him letters. But there was one time where someone came in with a phone and allowed them to record WhatsApp messages and to their families. And people, the mothers in our group, started getting the messages from their sons, and they were so excited and saying how wonderful it was to hear from their sons and all the things that they were telling them. So we were waiting to get our message from Maoz. We hadn't heard from him in weeks. And then we get it, and it's 11 seconds long. Yeah, we're going to play it for you. Okay, and what does he say? He says, "Hakos." We'll hear it, and then. Okay, so what does he say? He says, "Hakos sabava iti," like everything is fine, everything's a-okay. I assume if you live here, you know sabava. And zeu, ani mavken idkanti. I updated you. No more to say, over and out. And at the time, the mother who got it and then sent it to me, I wrote to her, "He is not a man of many words." And that's really true about him. He's a doer. He's one that always does what needs to be done in our house, cleaning up. When he goes to his friend's house, he's the one washing the floor. In the army, he does all the things that nobody else wants to do. And he's like very friendly and tons of friends, but not like a big talker, right? We have a house, there are a lot of big talkers in our house. Maoz would sit back and listen. So actually, I don't know if you know about this, but there's this like phenomena that after soldiers are killed in battle, often their families find these secret notebooks that they have with poetry, and then the poems
Journals.
become songs. As famous Israeli singers put it to music, make them songs. And during our Shiva, we were joking around that we don't expect to find any secret hidden notebooks of poetry from Maoz. He wasn't one that had an easy time expressing himself in words, right? Or even like diaries with his deepest, innermost feelings. But about a month after he was killed, we got a box with his personal effects that had been at the base. And there were notebooks there. But there was no poetry in the notebooks. The notebooks were lists. We saw that there were lists. We opened the first notebook, and it says on it, private, do not open, like with lots of X's or whatever. Of course, we opened it. And then what's on the first page? A recipe for hummus basar. But on the second page, there's there's what he wanted to say. He was a counselor in Bnei Akiva in 10th and 11th grade, and his chanichim were in 6th and 7th grade. And he, at the end of 11th grade, he had an activity with them where he gave them a parting activity where he gave them advice for life to these 7th grade boys. And I'm going to read it to you. Here's a picture of him as a madrich of Bnei Akiva. And what does he say? He says, I try to instill in you things that I think are important in life: building friendships, paying attention to your friends, fear of God, studying Torah, and taking initiative. I want you to continue to be together even if there are disagreements and everyone is different. Take the initiative, do things, join your friends if they organize something, be good friends. If there is a friend who's having a hard time socially, be their friend, even if they are annoying and not that much fun. Try to be on your phones as little as possible. From my experience, it's not good to be on phones for such a long time. Go to places where you study Torah, even if it is difficult for you, because that is the most important thing in life. And I think that, here we find these words that he wrote in 10th grade, 11th grade, trying to give advice for life. And, it's very, very, very moving for me. And there were other things in other notebooks, lists of that seemed mundane, actually, like of,
See if I can
it's not
fix
right.
it.
Just kind of like everyday lists, like I make, like what to do tomorrow. So on every list, we had wake up on time, because as we said, that was a huge challenge for him, but it was important to him. It was something that he wanted to do. So wake up on time, try to be focused all day, have kavanah in my prayers, go to sleep, goals for the coming week, go to sleep on time, wake up for davening because then I'll feel better all day, pay attention to what I say and how I speak to people. These are in high school and when he's in yeshiva. Try to learn well in the morning learning session. So we started to see that all these notebooks, even though they weren't poetry or diaries, that even in these mundane everyday lists, that he was giving us a little bit of a window into his inner soul and what's important to him and what his values were. And then we found a list that he made before he went to the army. My commitments for my army service: learn every day, go to yeshiva, go visit yeshiva for Shabbat once every 2 months, wear tzitzit all the time, write a halachic question in my notebook every day, to look at my service in a positive way and not be upset and disappointed all the time. Be a servant of God and during and after my service. Succeed in helping others in my group. Take initiative. Don't get upset and frustrated by the little things. Be careful about halacha without cutting corners. So, yeah. And this is right before he went to yeshiva, to the army, when he was 20. And so what we saw was, from reading this list and each time being blown away a little bit more, was that even though he didn't write poetry, that these lists were his poetry. And one final list I'm going to share with you was when he was given the job of being the magist, being the one that holds the mag. So he was very disappointed. He had wanted a negev, which is a much cooler weapon. His brother had that. And nobody likes this job, but he got it. And so he made himself a list of what his goals were for being a magist. Don't complain, because it's really easy to when you have it. Don't slow others down by walking slowly, because he's in the back with the heaviest weapon. So if he walks slowly, the whole group is slower. Always give 100%. Try and help others, and never give up. And 3 of boys in his group, 3 out of the 30 were at first given the mag, and somehow the other 2 found a way to get a different job. And going into Gaza, Maoz was really the only one that was with the mag, and all of his friends called him Magos, which is like Maoz and Maoz. So they called him Maoz. Anyway, so when Eitan and I, after Maoz fell, so we were interviewed a lot. We felt anyone who wanted to hear about our son, we're very happy to tell about him. And in one interview, the interviewer asked us, do you regret making Aliyah? Because you made Aliyah and then your son went to the army and then he was killed. If you had stayed in your comfortable America, that wouldn't have happened. And both of us said right away that we don't regret making Aliyah, that that to lose a child is, on a personal level, is the worst, is terrible. And unfortunately, people lose children from illness and from accidents, and we have a lot of friends that do. But the fact that the way that we lost our child was while he was fighting to protect OUisrael, so we feel that it's a privilege. And we're very proud of him, and we're happy to be able to go around and speak about him. But of course, on a personal level, it's difficult. I remember that after Maoz was killed, I was so busy trying to make sure that my children were okay, and maybe I was in shock or denial, that I really didn't even cry. And then we were invited to the wedding of a good friend of his from the army, the boy that he had a chavrusa with in Mesilat Yesharim. And we got to this wedding, and I got to the chuppah, and I guess I didn't have my children around me, and finally just hit me that Maoz so wanted to get married, actually. He was trying to start dating at the time, and Maoz is not going to be standing under a chuppah. He's not going to get married. He's not going to have children. And that was the first time that I really broke down and cried. And it didn't help that the boy spoke about him and was crying under the chuppah as well. So of course, it's so difficult for us on a personal level. And that's really the reason why we've been going around and speaking about him, because we feel that maybe if people hear about him, a regular kid that was so special, regular kid that fought every day for the things that he believed in. And if there are things that, that people hear about him that speak to them, that maybe they take into their own lives or pass over to their children or grandchildren, about the values that were important to him, about how he made for himself goals in life and then found steps to achieve them. He asked for help when he needed it. He would say he doesn't understand, if he didn't understand, and not be embarrassed. And so that if we go around and we speak about him, then he becomes not just our son, but not just his grandparents' grandson, but he becomes everyone's son and everyone's grandson. And in that way, he lives on in this world. And so we thank you so much for coming to listen to us today.
I just wanted to add that we brought stickers if people want, and also
all right, we made this into a sticker.
We have a lot of stickers here, and we also have a very special thing.
Let's talk about it.
That a friend of mine made like a card.
He learned with his daughter,
Mesilat Yesharim, for Bat Mitzvah, and he made this card. It's like a little bencher card, but it basically summarizes all of Mesilat Yesharim in a Venn thing in a little card. And it says here, Mesilat Yesharim, Tamid Itcha, always with you, in memory of Maoz. And on the back, there's a nice little memorial. So you can feel free to take those as well. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening.